our next two speakers, who are going to talk about Alzheimer's disease research and then the clinical trial process. First up will be Julie Sipchen. She is with the Global Alzheimer's Platform Foundation. They are a patient-centric nonprofit who are dedicated to working with sites like ours to speed up the delivery of innovative therapies to those who are afflicted by MCI and Alzheimer's disease. And they're a wonderful partner of ours. And then, of course, our esteemed founder and president, Steve Satek, who is also one of the planning members and board members of the Memory Care Coalition of Chicago, who will walk you through the clinical trial process. So thank you all for joining, and please take it away.
Great, thank you. So I will start. I am Julie Sipchen, and I am honored to be here today to serve on this conference. I apologize. I was in and out all morning because, as you can see, I was very busy competing. So I will do what I can to hopefully not do too much repeating. Let's see if I can share my screen. Great. Okay. So I'm here, as Amber said, to talk about why research matters and how you can help. I'm going to start with some of the doom and gloom, much of which you already know. But as we know, Alzheimer's disease in the United States, in the world, really is a public health crisis. We know almost 6 million people are living with Alzheimer's disease just in the United States. We know that at least 1 in 3 seniors will die with Alzheimer's disease. It is fatal, it is deadly, and it kills more people annually than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. We've seen an exponential increase in the number of deaths since the year 2000, while Alzheimer's has seen a 146% increase in the deaths. Deaths from more prevalent diseases like heart disease have actually decreased. So we see a disease that is growing, that is deadly, and there is no disease-modifying drug or therapy to treat Alzheimer's disease. It is also very expensive. We know that it costs about $300 billion a year just to treat. That doesn't include additional costs of the caregiving provided and other things that you all know so much about. So Alzheimer's disease is a public health crisis. It's not very different in Illinois, although we know this is scaled for size, but it's also growing, with over 230,000 people estimated to be living with this disease in 2020. Those are people ages 65 and older. We know that people who are younger than that get diagnosed as well, but generally speaking, 65 and older, and that number is expected to grow by 13% in just 5 years. So we know that it's dire. We know it needs to be addressed. We also know that recently with COVID-19, that brought rough waters to the sailing of Alzheimer's disease. We saw sites shut down due to COVID, whether it's because they were mandated, not deemed essential business at the time, whether it's because volunteers and or staff may have been hesitant to return right away or at all. But also people who are living with Alzheimer's have seen their impairment and their symptoms possibly accelerated due to social isolation, lack of access to adequate or healthy food. All of us, I think, have probably seen our sleep interrupted, our sleep quality degraded. All of those can impact cognitive impairment as well. But we also know that sites have stepped up. So they were clean to begin with, and now they're probably super clean. We know that many sites have worked hard to improve clinic flow, right? Making sure, like in the grocery store, there are one-way hallways, there are minimal staff at the facility with minimal contact. Many have developed alternative waiting rooms, whether that's waiting in different areas of a clinic, not traditional waiting rooms, or even waiting in the car and getting a text message when it's your turn for an appointment, and visual reassurances of their cleanliness and attention to patient health, which again has always been first and foremost, now with that additional layer. Some clinic sites have had like a sticker that shows how the last time they themselves were cleaned up and or visibly washing surfaces in front of patients and volunteers to, again, create that reassurance. But it's not all doom and gloom. Red sky at night is kind of what we're looking at. There is hope on the horizon. We know, as I said, it's been almost 18 years since a therapy was approved. It's been the first new therapy was approved in China recently. We have several candidates in the United States pending approval, hopefully later this year, early next year. But again, our barrier continues to be that Alzheimer's clinical trials are among the most expensive and slowest trials to conduct. We know a phase 3 clinical trial, which is that period right before it gets approved by the FDA, can take up to 7 years to complete at a cost of between $500 million and $1 billion. And that doesn't even include things like marketing and distribution once it's available. This is literally just in that one phase of research. So that's where my organization comes in. As Amber so eloquently stated, the Global Alzheimer's Platform Foundation, which we fondly refer to as GAP, is a network of over 80 sites across North America that work to make trials faster and less expensive. And we do that through the network by providing what we call high-touch services and resources to our trial sites. So I have colleagues across the country who physically go and frequently visit clinical trial sites engaged in Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease trials and help them work through challenges that they're having, barriers to success. That could mean providing spot help on things like marketing or process flow, or a big one, trial recruitment, helping them identify areas of opportunity within their system for optimizing patient volunteer involvement, site staff efficiencies, and really making their work at the site easier by doing some of the heavy lifting, whatever we can do to support them. At the same time, we also work with study sponsors to share what is happening across our network to try to make some of the other protocols easier to manage for the site so that they can spend less time on things that are distracting from the actual work of getting this research done. So again, if we think about sailing, right, you have a skipper and a crew. The skipper is generally focused on steering, on considering boat speed, the sail situation, and communication with crew that's positive and productive. The crew keep their eyes on the course, keep track of time, maybe looking at what other boats are doing, and report on things like wind pressure and breeze back up to the captain for a smooth cruise. So if we take that to what we do at GAP, we think of our sites as the skippers. They're focused on leading the trial. They identify and qualify volunteers. They collect and report data. They provide high quality medical care, and this is really important. If you are involved in a clinical trial, you will receive exceptional attention to your health care and well-being, more so than you would receive from maybe an annual doctor visit. Not to disparage your personal doctor, but this is generally more frequent and specific. They're also integrated and engaged with their community, as you can see with our friends at Great Lakes Clinical Trials being part of the Memory Care Coalition and other local organizations. They really build on those community roots to develop trust and to be that expert industry resource. GAP is like the crew. We put all hands on deck, we plug holes where we can, and we provide whatever site support we can provide, and again, sharing strategies across our network. We might find that folks in Boston have figured out a solution to the problem that our friends in San Diego have been struggling with, or people in Texas have found a really innovative way to bring in more volunteers, and we tell the folks in Vancouver and they try it too. So it's a really great system, again, of this communication. So again, I'm here to talk about clinical trials, why it matters. Well, we know the first person who will be cured of Alzheimer's disease will have participated in a clinical trial. That's where the magic happens. So one, that's an opportunity. You might be that person, or you might know that person, but really the more people we have in clinical trials, the faster we will find that person. So the need for more participants is really significant. What we've been able to estimate is that current trials are going to need over 25,000 people to participate. Now, given the fact that some studies we did a few years ago found that 60% of people are generally willing or would consider participating in a trial, less than 10% actually do that. But you think about 25,000, and it might seem like in the grand scheme of things, that's across the whole country. How hard could it be to find 25,000 people to participate in these trials? Well, we found that we would need to touch or contact 37.5 million people to get down to that 25,000 number. So that's the challenge right there. And again, that's due to a number of things within this funnel that filter people out or make them ineligible. So if we reach out to 37.5 million people for a variety of reasons, only 10% end up probably being referred to any number of the clinical trial sites. So now we're down to 3.7 million. Still doesn't seem super difficult. But we find that really only 4% of those are going to get screened, again, due to a variety of reasons. They change their phone number, they fall off, they don't even make it to the process. They change their mind. The site can't contact all those people due to their limited resources. So now we're down, if we take that 4%, we're down to about $150,000 people. From there, we find about 20% of the people just drop out. Again, their symptoms may have been accelerated. Their family may have talked them out of it. They may have too many other things going on. They can't participate. So now we're down to 125,000. Of those, we generally see about an 80% screen fail rate. And that means when you are starting in a trial, there's a screening process to determine your eligibility, meaning you meet the criteria for that study and you have the capacity to complete that study. 80% screen fail rate is pretty high. And while we're doing everything we can to improve the quality of the people who begin that process, we still need the quantity. So that's where we get down to that 25,000. So again, we need all the people so that we can get all the right people into the study. And ideally, those right people represent a wide variety of experiences and biologies so that we can find treatments and therapies to meet the needs of as many people as possible. So we need help. That help comes in the form of what we at GAP call citizen scientists, because that's what they are. They're everyday citizens. That's me, it's your neighbor, it's your mom, and they've decided they want to be part of research without becoming a researcher. So I'm going to let you hear more about the citizen scientists. This is right from them. This is Rochelle. Rochelle has been involved in clinical trials for 18 years. She has used virtually all of her paid vacation from her actual paid job to participate in these trials. She started as a research partner to her mom and her aunt, who were both living with Alzheimer's disease, and then became a volunteer herself, because her mission says we will never find a cure unless people are willing to step up, and she has done so in tremendous ways. This is Barb. Barb has a family history of Alzheimer's as well, and she watched her dad kind of diminish under dementia, and so she started to feel like she had some symptoms herself, and she went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, that's just normal aging, you're fine, don't worry about it. Well, something was nagging at her, and she went to get a second opinion, and sure enough, the doctor said that it was most likely that she was living with Alzheimer's disease, and so she immediately began participating in a study, because she's of the philosophy that participating in a study is like buying a lottery ticket, and you never know when you're going to have the winner. She's still living with Alzheimer's. She's very active in her community and teaching exercise classes. And this is Richard, and he is a volunteer at Great Lakes Clinical Trials, and he also has an extensive family history of Alzheimer's disease, served as his uncle's caregiver, volunteers with the Alzheimer's Association, and through that sparked an interest in participating in trials. He continues to participate, travels a great distance frequently in order to participate, because again, he feels very strongly that he would like to avoid what he has seen happen to his family for other people. What we've learned through GAP and through working with our network, working in this field, is that this rising tide can lift all boats. Volunteering in a trial, we know, will help future generations. Volunteering in a trial will help future trials. Trial work, both the successes and failures, will help the entire industry. We know that even when trials fail, we learn from them. And GAP works to share information across sites, across the country, to build that wealth of information in order that the next trial we do, we can learn from our mistakes and do better and better and better. So whether the cure is eventually found or a disease-modifying treatment is eventually found in Houston or Chicago or Vancouver or Toronto or Boston, it will be for everybody's benefit because we will all have participated. So the only way we're going to weather this storm, it's actually a tsunami of Alzheimer's disease as it continues to grow exponentially, hitting our communities, hitting our families, is through working together, right? So whether it's the sponsor, the company that has the medication, treatment, or therapy, with our clinical trials sites who are working hard every day with patient safety first of mind to make sure that everything is being followed and done and all the T's are crossed, the I's dots, and they do it with a smile. And you, whether you choose to volunteer, take information you've learned today and share it with your friend, family member, or neighbor, and it drives them to participate, that's where we're going to find the answer. That's where we're going to have the success. So what can you do? Well, for those of you who are interested, again, in sharing information or exploring trial opportunities, the GAP Foundation has this cool map where you could put in your zip code or just click on a dot, find a trial site near you. You should know that many of these sites, like our friends at Great Lakes Clinical Trials, have studies, clinical trial research that isn't just Alzheimer's disease. They may do nutrition or exercise or eczema or all kinds of things. And participating in a trial is helpful and important, even if it's not just around Alzheimer's disease. So you can click on our map, find a site, see what studies they're doing, see how you can participate at no cost to you. And trust me when I say these sites will make it as easy as possible for you to participate. Thank you.
Julie, can I ask you a question? Somebody asked, can you give us examples of when people are ineligible for a study other than not being able to complete the study? Are there other parameters that might disqualify someone?
Sure. I mean, it depends on the study. So each study has its own eligibility criteria per se that could be related to age or comorbidities or, again, general health and well-being, as well as their ability to fulfill the requirements or expectations, whether it's a monthly visit to the trial site or less regular or more regular, the length of time for each visit. So that would be specific to a trial. But if it interests you at all, again, you can contact any trial site that's closest to you where you might be likely to go, and they can tell you what they're recruiting for currently and what that criteria might be.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'll pass it to you, Steve.
Okay, I am going to do a share screen right now. Okay. All right, so how's that? Can people see my screen okay?
Yep.
Great. All right, well, thank you, Julie. Let me open this up here. So I'm Steve Satek, president and founder of Great Lakes Clinical Trials, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what clinical trials are, because we often see that there's a misconception out there in the world about what clinical trials are and how to get involved. So the way that I look at this to kick it off is just asking people what they think about when they first hear the word volunteer. When I ask this in a more of a in-person setting, usually people raise their hand, they talk about collecting donations or teaching a child to read or even doing community gardening. All of these are great ways to volunteer for the community. But how many people really think about joining a clinical trial to volunteer to help advance medicine? And that's really what clinical trials are all about, having people from the community joining research studies to help advance medicine. Clinical trial volunteers are an integral part of our research process. How people don't realize that we look for healthy individuals as well as people that do have a disease. The healthy individuals might be part of a prevention study. So for example, in the area of Alzheimer's disease, you might not be experiencing memory loss, but you might join a memory trial because we want to prevent memory loss from happening in the future. So I'm going to take you through, my agenda here is very simple. It's the who, what, where, when, why, and hows of clinical trials. So starting out with what is a clinical trial? First of all, it's in the simplest terms, it's a scientific study that answers a medical question. And quite often those medical questions relate to, does a certain treatment or a medication improve your condition? Is it a safe treatment? Is it better than other treatments that are available on the market? And I use the word treatment lightly because it could be a treatment like a medication, or it could be a lifestyle or a behavioral change, as we heard from earlier presentations, changing your diet or doing exercise or those sorts of things. Those are all sorts of clinical trials. What's really important is not confusing a clinical trial with a marketing research or focus group. They're very different things. And let me kind of go into that a little bit. It's more about taking medications and about your health. So first of all, think about how many people out there have ever taken a prescription medication. And I would be very surprised that every one of you aren't raising your hands at home right now, because it could be anything from an over-the-counter medication to an antibiotic you take in a short term, or something you're taking for a more chronic disease. Most of us have taken a prescription medication in one period or not. Now, think about this. Every medication that we've ever taken by prescription has first been studied in a clinical trial to determine if it's safe and if it works. In other words, if you have high blood pressure and you're taking a medication, there could have been a clinical trial on that medication 5 years, 10 years, maybe 15 years ago, where people volunteered for the study to determine if the medication is safe and if it works. Another way to look at this is clinical trial volunteers had to participate in research to make that medication available to you. So you're able to live a happier, healthier life with hopefully better quality of life, because individuals years past had volunteered for research studies. That's kind of the altruism that we have in research, and that is, if you participate in a research study today, yes, you could actually help yourself, but more importantly, you're actually helping future generations. So just going back into that, what I was talking about with what is a clinical trial, I want to make sure it's clear the difference between standard of care, going to your regular doctor's office, and what a clinical trial is. So when you go to your regular doctor's office, you get your routine care. It's a ton of flexibility. He or she could actually prescribe a whole slew of different medications to treat a single disease, or offer behavioral changes like diets or exercise. There's a lot of different flexibility there. And most of the options that the doctor will present have been tested and have been approved. And they work for most people. Now, in the area of clinical trials, you're still going to the doctor's office. It looks like a regular doctor's office. You have nurses, a waiting room, everything that you normally see. But when you come in there for an Alzheimer's trial, for example, you have to follow a defined protocol. It's stated when your visits are. You're going to be coming to the clinic every 4 weeks or every 8 weeks. You're going to have these tests done. You're going to be provided with this medication. There's not a lot of flexibility. It's a very defined protocol. And in that protocol, we're looking to answer those questions I mentioned on the earlier slide. Does the medication work? Is it safe? And those sorts of things. So we're still trying to figure out how the medication works. All right, so now I'm going to go into the who participates in clinical trials. This slide kind of sums it all up for us. It's just about everybody participates in clinical trials. People of all ages and background, healthy individuals, people with an illness. And to the question that was asked earlier from Maureen, eligibility requirements for each trial are different. So Julie had mentioned it could be you're not in the right age range for the trial. You might be taking a medication that is prohibited while you're on the clinical trial. More often than not, in the area of Alzheimer's disease, if you have another neurological disease like Parkinson's disease or MS, those are usually exclusionary criteria. Again, every single research center can actually go through those inclusion-exclusion criteria with you over the phone even to actually determine if you would qualify or not. But basically, requirements are based on age, gender, the type of disease, current treatments, or other medical conditions. I want to talk about one study that was done as we talk about who participates in research. This is a study that was done in 2018. It was the largest study of its type, asking seniors around the world about their viewpoints on Alzheimer's disease and research. Importantly, about 62% of the people that responded were worried that they might develop Alzheimer's disease. So there's definitely an awareness out there. we were really happy. As researchers, I was pleased as punch to know that almost 80% of people said they were willing to participate in medical research. So people know about research. They know that's the answer to finding a cure. But the thing that actually was most disheartening to me is that 75% of the respondents said they had no idea how to get involved in research. So we have a massive awareness gap here. People want to participate in research and people don't know how to get involved in research. And that's why there's individuals like myself and Julie who are out there doing our grassroots effort to actually raise awareness to people who actually want to participate in or can participate in clinical trials. So our biggest challenge in research is actually we see so many study delays. 70% of our research studies are delayed because we don't have enough people joining clinical trials, which is crazy because so many people want to join a clinical trial, but people don't because they don't know how to find them. And so we're trying to close that gap as much as possible. So how is a clinical trial conducted? I'm going to take you through a general process of memory-related clinical trials. So the first thing that you want to do when you do find a clinical trial, and I'll talk a little bit later about how to find a clinical trial, but when you actually want to join a trial is pick up the phone and you can call the research center. They'll have a preliminary discussion with you to generally discuss and describe the study design and the eligibility criteria. That's where we might be able to determine if you wouldn't qualify if you have a different disease that's also ongoing that might disqualify you. Maybe your age range is wrong. This is what it will be discussed over the phone. And if everything looks good from our preliminary discussion, we schedule a clinic visit for you to come in. Now, as we've talked about over some previous discussions, COVID has caused some challenges with some of our screening for trials. So one of the things that we've done at Great Lakes Clinical Trials, and I know that they're doing at a number of research centers around the country, is doing virtual memory consultations with individuals. So this is something that is not at Great Lakes. We don't orient it just to a clinical trial. Anybody can call our center any day and register to actually do a virtual memory consultation. It's no cost, no obligation, as long as you're over the age of 50, lasts about 45 minutes, and we do a face-to-face review with you about your lifestyle and see if that could be causing some problems with your memory. We look at your medications, we do some memory tests with you, so you kind of get a nice short 45-minute assessment of where your memory stands. This does not replace going to your doctor or going to a neuropsychologist like Dr. All and getting a full memory battery done. But it's a nice little way for you to determine, is my memory normal for my age or is it a little bit worse? So that's step one. And if you do have a concern about your memory problem and you want to join a clinical trial, the next thing for us to do is to set up an in-clinic screening. We have you coming into our clinic. We go through the informed consent form with you to understand exactly what the entire clinical trial is about. We assess your qualifications and eligibility through medical tests, where we ask a lot of questionnaires. I mentioned the informed consent before. This is your document to tell you everything about a clinical trial. Sometimes they're anywhere from 25 to 40 pages long, and they list all these things here, including everything that would happen to you on the clinical trial, past experience with the medication, risk, benefits, compensation, all those good things. So you come in, you do your screening, you're qualified, you want to go forward with the study. Then we get to the treatment period. And treatment periods for research studies are typically randomized, meaning by a flip of a coin, you get assigned to either the treatment group with the new investigational product or the control group, which is basically standard of care. We always need the two different groups so we can assess if the new treatment is actually working compared to standard of care. We initiate the treatment, so you have follow-up clinics to the visits, and there's a lot of priority on safety. You're getting a lot of lab tests, you're getting a lot of physical exams. If you are having any side effects, we want to know early, as soon as possible, that the medication might be causing a problem so we can withdraw it. So a lot of focus on safety. So the study characteristics for Alzheimer's trials is that they can, for like trials like migraine disorders or for cholesterol, they're usually short studies, few days, couple weeks long. But Alzheimer's trials tend to last many years because it takes years for us to determine if memory is declining or not. Clinic visits can be short. They can last 15 minutes or they can last up to 4 hours. And at each clinic visit, you'll have doctor's appointments, you'll meet with the doctors, you'll have exams and tests, and you'll get your new medications. One thing I want to point out is that some studies provide free transportation to and from our clinic. And Julie didn't touch too much on this, but they actually, the Global Alzheimer's Platform has provided sites in the past with free transportation to pick up our Alzheimer patients at home, drive them to the clinic, and then drive them back, trying to eliminate that burden for participation in clinical trials. So why join a clinical trial? Participants in trials actually get in charge of their own healthcare a little bit more than we see for individuals that aren't in a clinical trial. You're getting checked up quite more frequently by your physicians. You actually have part of the decision process in a little bit more proactive manner. That's a basic reason to participate. This is a survey that was done by the Center for Investigation of Study and Clinical Research Participation called CISCRIT. They asked individuals, I think there was 12,000 people in this survey, why are they motivated to join clinical trials? First, by far, people thought that they wanted to educate themselves better about the treatment that they have, to get better treatments, to help other individuals. And you can see way down the bottom there is to receive money. You know, most clinical trials do pay participants to join studies, but really that should not be the motivation to join a clinical trial. You should be joining to either make yourself better or to help advance medicine. Why don't people? So this is part of the same survey. The major reasons people don't participate in research: lack of awareness. They think they don't qualify. There's fear of the unknown, inconveniences, and confusion about insurance. From our stake at Great Lakes, I can be very clear about insurance. We don't take insurance. We don't have a billing department. When you walk through the door, every single procedure and activity that happens at Great Lakes is 100% free, covered by grant support from each study. Where do I find a clinical trial? Right now, there are over 110,000 clinical trials ongoing in the United States today. So there are clinical trials all over the place. These are just a few websites that you can go to find clinical trials. Clinicaltrials.gov is a government-funded website that lists every clinical trial in every disease area. And you can always find clinical trials in your geographical area through that website. Notably, clinical trials can be conducted in multiple areas. Here, I grew up in Chicago, and when I was growing up, I thought research 100% had to be done at the major medical institutions, because we have amazing medical institutions in Chicago, like Rush, Northwestern, University of Chicago, phenomenal places. But what I didn't know growing up is that research is also conducted in doctors' offices. It's conducted at smaller community hospitals. And it's conducted in private research centers like Great Lakes, where all we do is research. So you can find research studies just about anywhere. Now, speaking specifically about memory loss research in the Chicagoland area, the facilities I talked about earlier, the major medical centers like Rush, Northwestern, University of Chicago, do great work in Alzheimer's research. In addition, the other centers that do research in the Chicagoland area, Great Lakes Clinical Trials, we have 2 offices in Chicago and Arlington Heights. And then we also have the Advocate Lutheran General Hospital in Park Ridge and the AMITA system out in Elk Grove Village at Alexian Brothers Medical Center. We're able to go on those websites I talked about earlier and find out where research is done in Chicago. So these are really the places that all Alzheimer's research is being done in the Chicagoland area. So you can always pick up the phone, call any of these centers, and they should be able to tell you what's going on, or check out their website in terms of new studies. I will point out that these 4, the non-university centers, these are all centers that are part of the Global Alzheimer's Platform that Julie had mentioned earlier. So Dr. Gittleman at Lutheran General, Dr. Fricchetti at AMITA system, and the Great Lakes team, we all work really closely together. We're not competitors by any means. We collaborate as much as possible to make sure we're doing as good a job as we can. Final slides here I just want to talk about is when is the right time to consider a clinical trial. And specifically in the area of Alzheimer's disease, the time is today. You know, our memory's not going to get better on its own. So if we are seeing a decline in memory, we need to act sooner rather than later. Waiting until tomorrow, it's just like kicking a can down the road. And it's actually more challenging than that, because your memory is going to get worse as time goes on. And so regaining that memory is going to be really, really challenging. And what's important, and I mentioned it earlier, is that if we don't do research in today's generation, it's going to kick the can down to the next generation to do the research to find a cure. So if we are going to find a cure for Alzheimer's disease, we need to get our seniors and our elderly Americans to get involved in clinical trials today. We need people like you, your family members and friends, to change the course of this disease so we can get a disease-modifying treatment out there to improve the lives of all that it affects. I will mention, Julie touched on it a little bit. We are doing a number of studies throughout all the sites here in Chicago that are a lot more advanced today than we saw 10 years ago. We're seeing drugs that have shown promise in earlier studies that actually have shown an effect move on to the next stage of research into the phase 3 studies where we're confirming that these drugs could possibly work. So we are very close to the brink of having 2 or 3 new medications approved in the coming years in the United States, which is so super exciting. We haven't seen that happen since the late 90s, early 2000s. So, and the only way to get access to these medications, the only way is through a clinical trial. You cannot go to a regular doctor's office and say, hey, I want that new treatment that's out there. Those treatments are being studied in research, and you need to join a clinical trial to try and get that innovative treatment. So I want to thank you for joining. For those of you who are in the audience, and I didn't ask this at the beginning, anybody who has actually participated in a research study, I just want to take a time out to actually say thank you for your participation, because you're helping us live happier, healthier lives, and we do consider you to be our medical heroes. So thank you.
Steve, Julie, could you answer a question here? Is it true that some treatment meds may not work as well with African Americans? And are there any studies geared to the African American population?
Yeah, I can absolutely answer that. I think we alluded to it earlier too. We don't know how every medication works in every different type of individual out there. And that's one of the reasons that we do clinical trials. And we do look at different demographics of the population to see if a medication works better on a different population than another population. A great example is Asian Americans or individuals who live in Asia. There's a very big difference in terms of metabolizing drugs in your system. And so we always look at differences, whether it is an Asian population, African American population, or any other demographic. We don't see a huge difference between African Americans and Caucasian in the population, but we are assessing it in each of our trials. We do see quite frequently that our research studies have some sort of requirement that we do recruit a certain percentage of minority populations so that we do get a better pool, a more representative pool of the United States in our research studies. I think if you looked back about 10, 15 years ago, you probably saw a lot more Caucasian participation in a research study because there wasn't enough outreach into minority communities. Today, we see it that much different. Julie, did you want to add anything, or was that clear enough? Thanks.
Oh, you guys are great. Thank you so much, Steve and Julie. Are there any more questions? I'm just looking through the chat and the Q&A to see if there's anything we might have missed. I think we got everything. You guys covered everything so thoroughly. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, my pleasure. A copy of Julie and Steve's presentation and a link to the recording will be available on the chicagomemory.org website in a few days. And also on the website will be a click-through for their evaluation. And we welcome feedback from all of our spectators, not just those that need CEUs, but from our general population as well. One more question just popped in. My 94-year-old mother has advanced dementia. Would I be a good candidate for the research?
So yes, that's, typically there's 2 parts of that question. One, your mother being 94, once you get into that age range, probably not the best candidates for clinical trials, but for yourself, considering for a research study, there are a number of research studies being done right now that are looking at genetic risk that are involved in Alzheimer's. So you might actually screen for a study. We might ask you if you want to have your apolipoprotein E genetic classification done. And if you are, there's a possibility that can determine if you are at greater risk for developing Alzheimer's in the future. We do know that there is a hereditary risk in Alzheimer's disease. It's not a deterministic thing, meaning if your mom has Alzheimer's, you are not guaranteed to get Alzheimer's. But there is a risk profile that can be established based on what your genes look like, what your behavioral and your lifestyle looks like, and those sorts of things, and determine if you would actually be at a greater risk. Now, people who are at a greater risk tend to have a lot of research studies are designed for people who are at a greater risk for developing Alzheimer's. So yes.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome Gail Nixik, who is going to introduce our next event, an athlete.